Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me today, I have a Jer.
Hello.
And a Wheeler.
Ahoy.
Reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support at the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Welcome to part 2 of our Canadian Highlander Commander Legends set review. Reminder that our set reviews are not exhaustive. We don't talk about every card, only the ones that we think are relevant to the format. Today, we're going to be covering red cards, green cards, and gold cards. And without any other further ado, let's just jump right on into it and talk about Boarding Party. This is a 6-mana, 6/3 human pirate with haste and Cascade. Wheeler, you like Cascade. What do you think?
I mean, I like haste. I like Cascade. I typically like when they're together, and I like it when my cards have a lot of generic mana requirements. I look at this card, and I think that it's very close to being a win more card, which I'm sure it just glaringly looks like a win more card. But for a deck like medium red, like basically everything is a win more card.
I'm not sure I'd use win and this card in the same sentence.
So here, let me get to the skinny. So obviously this thing dying 6 mana dying to lightning bolt, not the best. When this cascades into a mana crypt or a mana vault, also not that great. But aside from like the absolute worst cascade hits, like even if this hits like a lightning bolt or a flame slash and is able to clear the way, ideally of something that could trade with this in combat, or something that's like really cheap, you're getting 6 power haste on the board and potentially, well, a lot more off of whatever your cascade is hitting. 6 is a lot. My personal medium red lists don't really go up to 6 or even that many 5s, but I know that that's not, everybody's version of this deck. And if you're packing a whole bunch of dragons, congratulations. Here's another dragon that gets you into another dragon.
I was going to ask if this is an honorary dragon. So Boarding Party counts as a dragon here?
Yeah, anytime I say dragon, it's just a big thing with haste.
Doesn't even have to fly or fire breathe.
Charging Monstrosaur is a classic dragon.
Yeah, like in Reality Smasher, Canonical Dragon, like having some kind of evasion is usually required, right? Like flying is the classic, trample is
speaking of trample, I wish this card had trample.
Yeah.
I wish this was a ball lightning, right? Like we want this to be a ball lightning with Cascade, don't we?
Then we'd be talking.
Yeah, like this is a card I can foresee playing or trying out, but it's not like, don't worry, there are other cards in here that are slam dunks for medium red. This is just kind of like if you want to really push it, you can do this.
All right, good warm-up card. Let's move on to a card that's more likely to see play, the Coercive Recruiter. 5 mana, 4/3 orc pirate for 4 and a red. When it or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. Until end of turn, it gains haste and becomes a pirate. JR, what do you think?
This card's actually pretty exciting. I think after looking at it and thinking a bunch, I think it's an upgrade to Zealous Conscripts for the most part, in most of the decks that play Zealous Conscripts. It itself doesn't have haste, but it's got a better body, and you have the option to absolutely pop off with clones, or if you somehow play other pirates that I'm not thinking of.
Incidental pirates?
Yeah, the old incidental pirates. But yeah, I think the ability to pop off with clones and the better body makes it better. Because like often you don't really want to attack with your Zealous Conscripts because it's like a pretty high priority creature to have in play because it's a combo piece. So your opponent needs to play really scared when you have a combo piece in play.
Really quick, can you talk about the combo here in case people aren't familiar?
Yeah, so you can combo off with Kiki Jiki. You copy Kiki Jiki targets, or Splinter Totem also works. Kiki Jiki targets Zealous Conscripts targets Kiki Jiki, and rinse and repeat. And you could do the same thing with this card.
Cool. So. All right, let's move on to our first court that we're going to talk about today. We talked about them a lot in the previous episode. Here's the red one. 5 mana, 3 red. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. It's an enchantment. And at the beginning of your upkeep, Court of Ire deals 2 damage to any target. If you're the monarch, it deals 7 damage to that player or permanent instead. Wheeler, let's start with you, but let's all talk about this. How do you feel about the red court?
I mean, it's pretty messed up. First off, it's just a thing that gives you the monarch, which is already pretty solid. And then like its upkeep trigger lets you either end the game very quickly or clear the board and like prevent you from losing the game. So it's just like its ability is so much more focused on like allowing you to either reclaim the monarch, which, you know, if that happens, it's probably due to like evasive threats, like cheaper evasive threats, which this just knocks every Vendilion clique out of the sky. And if it's not doing that, then you're either doming them for 7, that doesn't take long to kill them, or you're doming out their creatures, which also is just like doesn't take that long to just remove any kind of hope that they have.
It's super good at fighting for the board, which is of the utmost importance once the monarchy is introduced.
Yeah.
Also, where did they get the number 7 from? Like,
I don't know.
Like 5 would have been reasonable.
4 double.
They wanted
2.
to end the game. They wanted to end the game in 3 turns.
But like, compare this to most 5-mana planeswalkers. It's so much better.
I understand that it's Commander and there's higher life totals, but even in Commander, if this card is just like deal 4 to anything, that still just ends the game very quickly. Like,
so let's talk about the fact that this is a 5-mana enchantment. Is that too expensive for our format? What decks actually want to play this?
I think this is where Jer and I will meet on the 5 drops that we'd like to play, is that when we play 5 drops, no matter how many of them we play, we're playing them because 5 drops win the game.
Yep.
And this is 5 mana, come into play. If I stick around, I'm winning the game.
Even if it doesn't stick around, you might just win the game.
Yeah, like I think that's the important thing with these courts, is that at the end of the day, even if they're gone, right, you are the monarch, which means that they've probably used resources to remove this enchantment, but not remove you being the monarch, or vice versa, right?
Let's get some deck examples. Obviously, it's a shoo-in in Big Red. Like any Wildfire deck, any Stacks deck loves this. Where else could this find a home?
Red mid-range decks, green-red monsters, Jund monsters, green-red ramp.
You could probably jam this in Blue Moon, honestly.
I was going to say, does Blue Moon play this in the role of like where Keranos used to be?
I think you need to be a little careful with Monarchy and like pretty hard control decks, but
yeah,
don't want to accidentally get burnt by it.
I mentioned Blue Moon because I think that's a deck that has received a bunch of cheaper threats, or not threats, cheap creatures that provide a lot of great utility, like Seagate Restore. What the hell is it called? Seagate Stormcaller recently, right? Like it's a thing you're going to play early, which will be able to block and help you keep the monarch. You obviously have young Pyromancers, well, Pyromancer and Seasoned Pyromancer. You have more of a push in those decks as well, kind of similar to how, you know, like Jared was talking about blue white in the last episode, where you don't play, you know, you're not playing Wrath of God or whatever. Is that Blue Moon, you know, you got Fire Prophecy, you got additional, even stuff like Brazen Borrower. Like you have more like 1-for-1 or kind of like tempo-ish cards that you can just, I mean, in with a court going, with the monarch going, it's like, yeah, I guess I'll just bounce your creature that you'll get to replay. But that bounce also just means that you get to keep the monarch.
Okay, so Blue Moon works, or I just try and wrap you up on that one?
Yeah, Blue Moon's going to work. Like if you like the decks you play this in are decks that add red mana. Like,
all right,
there's not a lot. There's not a lot of nuance needed for these enchantments, realistically.
Let's move on to Emberwilde Captain, 4 mana, 4/2 Djinn Pirate for 3 and a red. When it enters the battlefield, surprise, surprise, you become the monarch. And whenever an opponent attacks you while you're the monarch, the captain deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. Wheeler, what do you think?
Yeah, this card's kind of messed up. It's super easy to cast in that it's only a single red pip. It gives you the monarch, so already it's a creature that comes into play and gives you the monarch, which is a pretty big check mark in its favor. The fact that it hits for like hitting for 4/2 is not exactly the best body in the world. You know, dying to shock isn't exactly something you want to phone home about, but hitting for 4 damage in a medium red deck or a red X, like a Gruul mid-range deck or whatever, is perfectly fine. That's okay by my standard. And then you just have this added ability of like punishing your opponent for attacking you and trying to get the monarch back.
Yeah, for trying to fight on the access, which you have now made them fight on. Like,
yeah, like they
have to attack you because they have to get the monarch back, and there's situations where they will not be able to attack you until they remove this creature.
Yeah, and like even if they attacking already has a cost, right? You're actively removing creatures from your selection of available blockers against medium red or against decks that are going to play creatures and red cards. So there's already a cost to taking the offensive, air quotes, but this just is is like, nah, take an additional 3, idiot. And like, that's not even factoring in that, they just have to attack. They don't have to take the Monarch. We've seen previous cards, Knight of the Black Thorn or whatever, like an Orzhov Monarch card from the Conspiracy, the original, Conspiracy 2, I believe, when Monarch was introduced, that said when an opponent becomes the Monarch after they become the Monarch from hitting you, then they get punished. But this doesn't even say that. This says they have to attempt to get the Monarch back, right? And shockingly, you got removal spells.
Well, and there's also an interesting play pattern where you can just choose to keep all your creatures, like not block, keep maximum attackers, and just keep trading the monarchy back and forth while they're taking extra damage. And you're a red deck, so you're likely already favored in a race.
Chances are your linear aggressive deck will probably be able to utilize all the extra cards like more without the risk of drawing situational cards or just having cards clogged in your hand.
Next up, we have the Fathom Fleet Swordjack. That one's actually just kind of fun to say. Fathom Fleet Swordjack. 4 mana, 4/3 Orc Pirate for 3 and a red. Whenever it attacks, it deals damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking equal to the number of artifacts you control, and also encores for 6. I'm going to throw to you again, Wheeler, just because it says artifacts. What do you think?
I think this card has a whole bunch of things going for it, but ultimately I feel like it might just fall flat. Probably going to fall flat. The fact that it counts about artifacts, has a whole bunch of colorless mana in its, or generic mana in its mana cost, and that it has Encore, which again requires you to have largish amount of a mana sink, kind of lines up for, say, like an artifact-based aggressive deck that is going to play Wheel of Fortunes, Mana Crypts, Ancient Tombs, that kind of stuff. Like, it can fit into a deck that wants to play a bunch of artifacts, check, has the, tendency to occasionally draw too much mana, and it doesn't mind a mana sink, check, has a way to, put it into the graveyard outside of it just dying in combat from Wheels and Faithless Lootings, check. So, and even stuff like Bomat Courier. So it's interesting because it just has all these things that line up for it. And even stuff like Lightning Greaves in your repertoire, Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, equipment that helps it, get off the ground. But I just don't know if all these things adding up are enough to justify playing it. Like, give it a try, but like, don't be shocked when you're like, well, turns out this card was bad. Or like not enough, I guess, is a more reasonable thing to say.
All right. Next up, we have Jeska's Will. 3 mana sorcery for 2 and a red. Choose 1, and that's the only text that matters to our format. So you can add red for each card in target opponent's hand, or exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Jared, what do you think?
I just think whenever I'm looking at modal spells, I always want there to be like a sort of default mode that is always good. And to me, this card just doesn't really have that. Like, the second mode is good when you draw this in the late game and you can sort of use it as a draw 3. The other mode is situational in that, like, you need something like big in hand that you want to power out, and you need to, like, need your opponent to be playing a little slower, or it needs to be like exactly your turn 3. So I just think this card just doesn't quite have like the consistency that we require from cards in this format.
You don't think it's going to have a home in one of the dedicated combo decks, either as like a ritual or a draw spell, depending where you are in your storm chain?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
Like, if you could play this in a storm deck that also uses Wheel of Fortunes, maybe. But like, what I think to cap off what Jer is saying is that, like, why would our combo decks need to play something that isn't the sure thing, right? Like, Seething Song is always Seething Song, and this card is not always going to be Seething Song. And
yeah, right, that's fair.
it just kind of needs to have that, hey, I always can do this, and it doesn't really do that.
All right, let's move on then to Rograkh, son of Rograkh. Apologies if I didn't nail that pronunciation. This is a legendary Cobalt Warrior 0/1 for 0. Has First Strike, Menace, and Trample. And I don't know if this card is good. It's cute. Oh, silence. Oh, absolute crickets. It's like, look, we play...
This is a meme, right?
Is it? I play Memnite. Is there a deck that wants free spells, or do you only care about Memnite because it's an artifact?
Memnite's an artifact, but it also has 1 power.
I play Ornithopter. Ornithopter also has flying. Like, this has keywords.
Yeah, I've thought about where this card could potentially see play for a long time. Outside of the realm where it's just another 0 mana creature that is like a worse option than everything else. And like technically you can like Caracas loop with this and like do Cloudstone Curio kind of things, but like we could have already done very similar things to that. One interesting place I did think about was in like a Blitz deck. The fact that you have a 0 mana investment into this creature, which means then spending mana on spells that give it like a reckless charge, like something like 1 mana +3/+0 and haste. Theoretically, that is a reasonable thing to do, but much like how the conversation with Jeska's will is just like, why do that when I could just play like Tarmogoyf?
A creature with prowess.
I like Jared's answer. Is this a joke? All right. Fair enough. All right, let's move on then. Let's talk about another fun named creature, Toggo, Goblin Weaponsmith. This is a 3 mana 2/2 legendary Goblin Artificer for 2 and a red. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a colorless equipment artifact token named Rock. Rock says equipped creature has 1 and tap, and sack Rock, deal 2 damage to any target and equips for 1. Wheeler, what do you think of this card?
So, speaking of things where people started off with, is this a joke? I think this card is very good, or has the potential to just be like a staple. I'm looking through this in the scope of a combo deck, Academy combo, because it checks off so many boxes, even ones that you wouldn't think. Like you can find this from both recruiters. It has Ancient Tomb mana. It's a goblin, which I have experimented and successfully found that turns out Goblin Matron, totally fine tutor card to play because there's Goblin Welders and Kiki-Jikis and all that jazz. It generates artifact tokens, which is huge. The requirement for doing that is having lands ETB, which Academy decks will either infinitely put lands into play or they will be able to put in multiple lands into play, be it through fetches or crop rotations, that kind of thing. And then the fact that this thing also just makes, like, these rocks can kill people. Like,
I was going to ask about the rock specifically. So when you're talking about combo potential, and I know I had Jer said he was interested in this card as well. Are you using the rocks to kill, or are you using the creation of artifacts as an engine here? I'll throw to Jer for that question.
I was thinking of it in an entirely different scope to Ben. I was thinking of it just in like a goblins deck, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I honestly think it's just reasonable in goblins. Like just gives you a bunch of reach. Like that deck is like the ultimate deck that like you just need to find the last 6 points. Like you're going to deal 14 damage, no problem every game, but you just don't have the concentration of burn spells that the other red decks do. So just having another reasonable body, super tutorable for that deck, that when you draw those lands in the late game just gives you additional reach.
Yeah, it's a goblin that lets you do goblin things.
And what was your combo thought, Wheeler?
Well, I mean, I guess my question is both. It's just like you like Academy combo decks, depending on your exact build, to some capacity, just being able to make a large amount of artifacts for free will then let you kill a thing. Like Academy decks never struggle to kill people. Like that's not a thing. Like when you build combo decks like that, the last thing you need to think about is how you kill them. But Toggo, like again, that's the last thing you think about. You look at this card through the lens of it's easy to find and what it does synergizes with everything your deck's looking to do. But then it also just happens to provide a way to kill people because all these artifact tokens you've made can now just get thrown at your opponent, right?
I do like the idea of killing your opponent by pummeling them with rocks.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel very 2020 Magic, but it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, like the first thing I thought when I looked at this was I'm going to animate an artifact land with Life Spark Spellbomb, and then I'm going to like loop Voltaic Keys untapping this artifact land as it throws rocks at my opponent to death. It's just, it's
all
good
right.
magic.
Let's move on to Wheel of Misfortune. 3 mana sorcery for 2 and a red. each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater. Then all players reveal those numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number. Each player who didn't choose lowest number discards their hand and then draws 7. Wheeler, do you want to explain that in simpler English there?
Sure do, Serge. I'm going to play this. Depending on whether or not my opponent has red mana available, I might decide ultimately what exact number I pick. But I'm going to play this, pick an extremely high number, and then draw 7 cards and kill my opponent. I'm going to try and treat this as much as I can as a literal copy of Wheel of Fortune that doesn't let them to draw cards. I guess a one-sided Wheel of Fortune that also says when it resolves, dome me for like 16 or whatever.
What was that old card from RTR that they could pay 5 life, and if not, you gained 3 life? Is this a punish mechanic, like as a comparison for the red decks?
RTR? You mean
wait,
Browbeat?
Pay 5 life to
no,
gain
there was
3 life?
there was a card that it had the weird buyback mechanic where you could cast it from your graveyard if you also discarded a card. Help me out here. Red decks loved it. Draw 3 or take 5.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Risk factor.
Risk factor.
Oh my
yeah.
god.
We don't have time for Punisher mechanics. But this is so this isn't the way that I think that this card will ultimately see play. Like when it sees play at its like best is when it's not the only punishment is that I'm going to dome myself out. And there will be occasions where this card could be dead in my hand because my opponent is just holding up a bunch of burn and they're waiting for me to dome myself for 15. But that's already something you just kind of like accept with cards like Windfall as well, where you're like, well, this card's just dead if my opponent just empties their hand quicker. Yeah, it's not. I don't see this card as a Punisher card by any metric.
No, it's
All
just
right.
like a high variance card.
Let's move on to green and let's talk about a very large lad here. We're talking about Apex Devastator. 10 mana, 10/10 Chimera Hydra for 8 green. And it reads Cascade, 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 Cascade. Wheeler, what do you think?
I mean, I'm probably going to cast Channel and then cast this. I don't know if that's the correct thing to do, but I will probably do it. I'm likely to try that out in a deck that isn't like a big Eldrazi green variant, although maybe that's fine.
I think you could cast this in like Hoof as well. Like,
yeah, I don't know if you need to cast it in Hoof, I guess. That's my thing. Like where I'm seeing this is I'm casting this in a deck that'll play like Channel and like Lich's Mirror, where you could just like reset the game or reset some things with the Lich's, with the Cascade triggers on the stack, or, you know, just I'm fine dealing a whole bunch of damage to myself or killing myself or adding a bunch of colorless mana. Yeah, I mean, this card is extremely goofy, right? Like this is
What's goofier, this or Maelstrom Wanderer?
Oh, this
for
one.
sure.
Easy. Yeah, big pop.
But it doesn't have haste. Yeah, all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right.
But
well, then let's move on to the final court, the Green Court, Court of Bounty. 4 mana enchantment for 2 green. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you're the monarch, instead, you may put a creature or land card onto the battlefield. This is the final one. How do we feel about the green one here, team?
Might be the best one.
Yep. Gonna have to agree with Jer on that one.
Is this going into like an oath style archetype?
Every green deck ever.
Every green, yeah.
Like this was tailor made for Scapeshift, but like it's so absurdly good. Like Hoof plays this. Every green midrange deck ever plays this.
Lands midrange.
Does Show and Tell, Sneak and Show start playing this?
Yeah, why not?
I mean, sure. I guess you could.
Yeah.
Can't make your deck any worse by including a card like.
I'm sure it's better than some of the cards people are playing in that deck.
This card is so stupid. Like,
well, I have an important question now. We've talked about all 5.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, of the 5, which you think is the strongest?
This one.
Green. Yeah.
No hesitation. You're like, lose 6 life, discard 2 cards. You're like, yeah, nah.
So this card lets you break the rules. It like this card's just like, okay, tell you what, the really good version, you get to break the rules like massively, right?
Like
you
like
just get
3
to
times.
Yeah,
You get to break like 3 of the most fundamental rules of Magic. You
Yeah.
get to draw extra cards, you get to play extra lands, and you don't have to pay for your creatures.
yeah, card like when you're teaching someone how to play Magic, like that's what those are the steps. Oh no, sorry, you got to tap your lands to cast your creatures.
All right. I guess when you put
Jesus
it that
Christ.
way, you're suddenly playing a completely different game. You're like, forget about damage. You're just cheating at this point. Is that what you're saying?
On basically every axis. Like,
God.
you're like, I'll take more cards, I'll play extra lands, and I won't pay for my things. Nice.
Isn't that the
Cool.
bonus you get in Archenemy or something like that? Well, like when
Yeah.
you're playing a 2v1 format.
It's going to feel like Archenemy
Yeah.
if your opponent plays this against you.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, there you have it. Court of Bounty, best court. Let's move on and talk about the Dawnglade Regent, the largest elk ever printed. 7 mana, 5 green, gets you an 8/8. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And as long as you're the monarch, permanents you control have hexproof. JR, what do you think?
Great. Yeah, this card's good. I would reanimate it. I would ramp into it with Hoof and or other ramp decks.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
one's much more reasonable than like Devastator. For like getting to 7 is like,
Sure.
I
Easy.
woke up. I'm gonna turn on my coffee but in the meantime,
I'll become the
All right.
monarch and you can't kill any of my elves ever. Like,
Jesus Christ.
All right. Let's talk about another large green friend. This is an 8 mana 5/5 Kamahl, Heart of the Krosa. 6 green gets you a legendary human druid. At the beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample. Sorry, I started laughing. You just get a free overrun. There's another activated ability, 1 and a green, until end of turn. Target land you control becomes a 1/1 elemental creature with vigilance, indestructible, and haste, and is still a land. JR.
this gets into druids because it's a druid and it wins you the game.
You can
Yeah.
find it with Green Sun Zenith.
Or Finale of Devastation.
Wow.
Or any of the other many creature tutors
Yeah.
available.
So just for druids, or are there any other green decks? Like, is this an
No.
alternate way for Hoof to sort of like push through damage at the end?
Hoof has better options available. You only play this in druids because you're like, it's a druid. Druids is not you don't make the optimal choice, you make the correct choice.
You make the druid.
And so we're like
choice.
cutting Hoof for this card, basically.
Oh,
Because it says druid on it.
Yeah.
I appreciate your dedication to the bit. And now, Wheeler, didn't you have some type of childhood connection with Kamahl?
Not really. I mean, I had a Kamahl.
No, I thought during the PPR you saw Kamahl and you were like, my sweet summer child.
No, I opened Kamahl and was like, wow, this card is going to kill people in Commander. And I mean, I had a Kamahl, the Fist of Krosa, but that guy, that's an old Canlander playable that we'd like to. Let's go back to when that card was like fine.
Was that the cycle where if you had a second copy of it, you could discard it to do something? Am I remembering that right from like Time Spiral or no?
My dear lad, this is all the way back in Onslaught. It's like is he 6 or 5 mana?
I've
Fist
got
of
it.
Krosa.
Yeah, 6 mana 4/3 for 4 green, legendary human druid, Jer. Green mana activated ability, target land becomes a 1/1 until end of turn. Okay. And for 2 green, creatures you control gain trample. Wow, the power creep is real here.
Yeah, it's got overrun and you can make things creatures.
He just got Kamahl got so much swoller. He went up from a 6-drop to an 8-drop, went from a 4/3 to a 5/5, and his activated ability is just free now. Wow.
Do you remember when Sam Yates was tooth and nailing for Kamahl and Elishnorn and then just Armageddoning his opponent?
See, that's the magic I want to go back
Good,
to.
honest magic.
Oh, right.
God.
Target land. You could just target their lands. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I don't want to be a cliche here, but do we have to go to the Court of Bounty? Let me go back to those days.
Fair enough.
Let me go back to Abundant Sylvan Library.
Oh my god, you're talking my language.
Oh, that was like my favorite combo. Yeah, Sylvan Library, you're like, I'm only drawing 3 cards. What if I added a 4 mana do nothing enchantment that was better?
This card's pretty good, but what it really needs is 4 mana more and another card. Now
I miss my opponent scooping to that. Like, I can't beat this. All right. Let's move on. Next up, we have Kodama of the East Tree. 6 mana, 6/6 legendary spirit for 4 green. Has reach, because of course it does. And whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with equal or lesser CMC from your hand onto the battlefield. Cool. Jer, what do you think?
Cards interesting. I wish it had trample instead of reach, so it would threaten your opponent a bit more. Like, my issue is, like, by the time most decks get to 6, the ability just doesn't really matter. Like, you're probably emptying your hand pretty much every turn anyways. Like, you likely don't have many cards left in hand, and you're casting a huge thing. Putting a lesser thing into play probably doesn't matter too much.
Is there some sort of weird combo potential with looping and bouncing creatures over and over? I'm thinking like your Allurin combo decks. Does this have a home in something like that?
You would never play this in Allurin. I was trying to think of that, and I couldn't think of anything. Like, nothing immediately busted came to my head. Like, you can just do better things without putting a 6-drop in your Allurin deck. But I don't know, Ben, do you know of anything that
No,
dig deep, Wheeler.
I mean, this card can this card can loop with things, but again, it's much like if I'm looping with a 6-drop in something like eggs, where this has a couple of loops, it's usually Time Spiral, and that's not exactly a 6-drop.
Yeah, all right. We tried.
Yeah.
If you got a combo, let us know. Let's move on to Magus of the Order. 4 mana, 3/3 human wizard for 2 green. Activated ability, green and tap and sack Magus of the Order and another green creature. Search your library for a green creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. Wheeler.
Great. I think this card's pretty good. I think that up front, I will acknowledge that, yep, it dies to Lightning Bolt, and yep, you do need to have another creature in play, but that's okay, because those have been challenges that creature decks have faced for an eternity. And I mean, I guess maybe in 2022, we'll get to the point where power creep means that Lightning Bolt is insufficient. But for now, I think that's okay. And I foresee myself playing this in basically every creature combo deck that has a large green base or uses green as like a big component. Like Hoof and Protean Hulk decks are the big jump outs to me. But
out of curiosity, what card is this referencing? Just if people don't understand.
Natural Order.
Natural Order.
Want to read that one real quick?
Oh, heck of a magic card. It's 2 and 2 green for a sorcery. Additional cost to cast Natural Order. Sacrifice a green creature. Search your library for a green creature and put it into play. Shuffle your library afterward.
How many points is it?
4 points, and I think it's worth every single one of them.
I love this card because it just epitomizes cowboy magic. You just play this and look your opponent in the eyes and you shrug. You're like, are you going to kill it? If not, you're not winning.
Now that you mention it, I definitely can see how, like, when this card was first previewed, I was looking at it and I was like, this is ridiculous. This is absurd and disgusting. And they're like, why? People are like, well, I mean, you can bolt it. I'm like, yeah, but they're not going to have it. Like, duh. And like, there's some truth to that.
It's like saying I can't cast Natural Order. They're going to counter it.
Well, I mean, I think that there is, like, when you have cards like this to give like a very big Poindexter point on it. When you have cards like this, you should acknowledge that, yeah, it will die to Lightning Bolts. You know, that's kind of a thing, like a metric that we judge a lot of cards to, especially ones without ETBs. But like, not every game will have it, and the ones where they don't, you're winning the game.
Well, and also,
right?
Like, you're playing this in a deck where they have a high propensity to bolt your early creatures. Like, if you have a turn 1 dork, they're going to bolt it. If you have a turn 2 dork, they're going to bolt it. If you have a turn 3 dork, they're going to, like, cast every removal spell available to kill it.
I'm sorry, do you think this is the first, like, I'm sorry, opponent, you think this is the first time I've played a 4-drop that just dies to bolt?
Yeah, exactly.
I've been casting Hunt, like, Master of the Wild Hunt for
let's go.
A decade now.
I'm already numb to your burn spells.
I cast 5 drops that died to bolt.
I'll cast Titania with no legal targets in my graveyard. You think I'm scared of this?
Bring it on. Oh my god. This is not good advice to new players, but so goes. So it goes.
I mean, I think it actually is good
Yeah.
advice to new
Live
players.
boldly. Don't worry about your creatures dying. That's
Yeah,
fair.
you need to win the game, right?
Control players aren't even playing Wrath anymore overextend.
You put your cards in your deck to play, and you play them to win the game. So don't, yeah.
Let's move on then to Numa. Oh, is this Joraga or a Yoraga?
Jiraga.
Joraga, that's that word. I've heard it before. Numa, Joraga Chieftain, 3 mana 2/2 legendary elf warrior for 2 and a green. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay XX. When you do, distribute X +1/+1 counters onto any number of target elves. Wheeler, what do you think?
It's an elf that can go into elves, and that made me sound more like a jerk off, but I was being genuine when I said it's an elf, which is important because it means it's easy to find in a deck such as elves, which is going to have a whole bunch of mana sinks, either just, hashtag infinite, where their Gaia's Cradle adds like 10 mana or whatever, or actual factual infinite, where they just add infinite mana. And this allows you to add infinite mana and then dump it all in to attack with your like extremely buff Findhorn elf now.
So swole. Findorn Elf's been hitting the gym.
Does this get into any of the counters decks?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think so. Like, it is a warrior, but
No, the restriction's really tough, right? Because Numa can only put the +1/+1 counters on an elf.
But she's an elf.
yeah, but Numa's an elf.
Just if she buffs herself, I guess.
Numa's an elf, and also just like, also it's a he, but Numa's an elf,
sorry.
and also just like, I don't know, maybe there is enough elves. Like in a counters decks will mostly have green and will play Llanowar elves and all these mana accelerants, and like maybe there's enough density of actual elves because there's a whole bunch of elves that care about counters, like a ton of them.
Rishkar.
Yeah, all right.
Immaculate Magistrate, like and all of them basically also say like, hey, I care about counters, and if you care about me, we can go infinite. So again, it all kind of ties together.
All right, let's move on to Reshape the Earth. 9 mana sorcery for 6 green. Search your library for up to 10 land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. JR, what do you think?
I think this card is sweet. I don't know how good it is. Like, if you cast it and then get to untap, you're winning. If you cast it in a Scapeshift deck, you just win.
Yeah, that's just Scapeshift lethal every day, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But you've already got 9 mana in Scapeshift. Haven't you already won at that point?
Well, no, not if you haven't been able to successfully resolve Scapeshift. But like,
this is a card that people will cast, and then they will never forget that Spell Pierce exists.
well, I feel like you're just signing up for Spell Pierce to not exist when you put this into your deck. But
Days has never felt worse than when you're like, they're tapped out. Now's my time.
Yeah, like I don't think you're supposed to play this in our format, but I'm probably going to, and it's going to be sweet.
Nice, Jer. Nice.
Noel Robin's going to cast this and be like, all right, great. Cabal Coffers, Urborg.
Ayamugan, Eldrazi Temple.
Yeah, it resolves. You start scooping up. You see the cards he's grabbing. You're like, wait, I'm not dead here? You're like, oh, God, no.
He's like, far
now
from
the game
it.
truly begins.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our final green card today and our final reprint in the set review that we're going to be talking about. We're talking about 3 Visits, a sorcery that a lot of people are very excited to see more of. 2 mana, 1 and a green gets you a sorcery that says search your library for a forest. Note it doesn't say non-basic forest, just a forest card. Put it onto the battlefield, untapped, and shuffle your library. I added a lot of words there, but there's a lot of subtlety as to why this card is really good. Jer, what do you think?
This card is really good. It's the best 2 mana Farseek rampant growth variant that exists, along with Nature's Lore, which functionally does the same thing. You should play it in all of your decks that want these effects, and now it should be easier to acquire. So that's awesome.
Heck yeah. All right, let's move on to gold cards. And up first, we have Abomination of Llanowar. This is a 3-mana star legendary elf horror. It has vigilance and menace, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of elves you control, plus the number of elf cards in your graveyard. Wheeler, does this do enough?
I believe so. So we've talked about elves a couple of times over the set review. They've given us a whole bunch of good ones, and they've given us a bunch of good ones in the colors that matter. So as far as just having a card that is like, hey, I'm large and I can get around chump blocking, great. Where my brain really started ticking with this, though, was like, there's a lot of things that elves can do that, especially in black and green, that really lead to just milling. So of course Ben is talking about dredge again. I genuinely think there's like an elf dredge deck where because you have so many, black green is the like, those are the best colors for dredge, right? Easy to put your stuff in your graveyard. You have a bunch of creatures that draw cards on ETB or when they sacrifice. You have a bunch of ways to already sacrifice your cards, and you have a whole bunch of cheap creatures to accelerate to your more, expensive engine cards or to fuel sack outlets such as Dread Return. And now you have, previously you had other like ways of reanimating something and killing them with a big thing, but Abomination of Llanowar in that kind of deck does it, but is also just a normal card. So like if you played that early enough, like congratulations, you might have like a 3-mana 7/7 with vigilance and menace. But then if you combo kill them, you might be able to reanimate this and then dome them out through some kind of spell or ability.
Like an old mimeoplasm combo, right? Like damage equal to its power and toughness. Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah.
Think of that kind of thing, but it will have power toughness equal number of elves in your graveyard, which is going to be, like 40 or like 35 plus. So
honestly, I didn't think it was going to have that much application. That's really neat.
Neither did I, because it's not something you think. I don't think any healthy person should immediately have their mind go to elf dredge.
Traditionally, star cards in our format aren't great, and we see them as things that require a lot of setup. And we talk about, like, there's 2 ways to evaluate a card. There's the best case scenario, and in Magical Christmas Line, you're like, this is amazing. And there's the worst case scenario. And depending on where those bars are, you can discuss if a card is going to make the cut or not. And I didn't think the worst case scenario in Abomination of Llanowar was good enough. And then you're talking about the situation where you're like, no, this thing's sweet.
There's a scale that I've been using. I don't have a great name for it, but I'm sure like this is going to immediately ring true to Jer. And anybody that has played at like tournaments, PTQs, whatever, where if somebody describes a scenario from they're like, hey, how'd your round go? And they start talking and you're like not really listening at the beginning because they're not at the good part, because every Magic player has to build things up. And like, if you can foresee that part of their story involving like this card, like if you're like, how'd your round go, Ben? I'm like, oh well, so I'm playing against this matchup and I go like turn 1 elf and like turn 2 abomination, and then on 3 I'm able to attack for like 4 or whatever, right? You don't care about that. That's not why I'm telling you the story, but it also it's not unrealistic. That's just what happens when you play matches of Magic with a deck that's built like that.
All right.
So that's like the story case of like, if it doesn't sound like too wild or whatever, like that's probably how this card's going to function, and that sounds perfectly fine to me.
Yeah, like if I wouldn't eye roll when you tell that story, then it's probably fine.
Words to live by. So we want to move on now to, I think, the card that we all, I've never seen this in a set review before. I'm going to talk before we introduce the card, where we all fought on who got to talk about this card. Like normally 1 or 2 people will be interested, but all 3 of us were like, no, I get to talk about this card. So we're gonna go in a cycle here, and we're talking about Aesi, Tyrant of the Gyre Strait. This is a 6-mana 5/5 legendary serpent for 4, a green and a blue. It says you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. I'll go first.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's exploration and a 1-sided Horn of Greed. It's going to go in every single lands deck I play from now on. It does everything you want it to do, and I don't even care that it costs 6 mana. It's incredible. Let's go Jer next.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's green sunnable. It has a solid body. It blocks, it attacks, it kills your opponent, it kills planeswalkers, it combo kills your opponent, values them out if you're not able to combo kill them. It's quite good.
And Wheeler?
Okay, so this wasn't in our like set review document because it's in the commander set, right? It's in the decks, like the pre-made commander decks that are coming out with Commander Legends.
Oh, so you can't open this in a booster pack?
Yeah, but it's technically in the set. And so I imagine that's why it wasn't there. But I didn't see it and I was like, oh, I definitely thought Serge or Jer would have wanted to talk about this. And if it's not here, then maybe they don't want to. That's weird. I'll claim it. And then I come back later and it's marked as group. I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. I want to just bring this back with Goryo's Vengeance and play it in the like 4-color fastbond legendy kind of combo deck that uses lands and Second Sunrise, Yawgmoth's Jacuzzi for those true connoisseurs. Yeah, it doesn't die to Bolt, which I mean, Tatyova obviously negates fastbond damage because she gains life whenever the land comes into play. But she's a 3/3, and the fact that you get like off the bat the one additional land, like that's huge. Like okay, I'll get this back, and then Glacial Chasm. Right?
Yeah, that's so big.
Yeah.
It's hard to stress how important that is because Tatyova then isn't a 5-drop; she's a 6-drop if you're playing around Bolt, right?
Yeah. You like want to get your mana out before, and so you're just like, well, I have to play Glacial Chasm on a turn, or I'm going to kill them, but have enough mana to play whatever engine piece I need to get out. And this is just like, here you go, bud. Go ahead and get that extra land. So yeah.
An important thing in lands is, with the exception of maybe the Gitrog monster, a lot of your engine cards don't have a body, and it's very hard to win a game of Magic when you're playing lands unless you have like the Dream Hand or something like that. If your opponent is being aggressive and they're pushing the board with their creatures, so sure, your Coercive Recruiter might be able to block a little bit every now and then, but it gets scary. It's really nice to see Aesi as a 5/5 because finally this is something that you want to include. It's something that's going to help you win the game once you get the engine pieces going, and it can actually protect your life total.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm ever going to attack with this card.
No. You're probably going to win once it's there, but there's a number of times, your Tatyova's down and you're being pressured by a 3/3 and you're like, I can't really afford to block with this, but I also can't afford to not block with this. And
yeah.
Aesi doesn't really have that problem. All right, let's move on to Araumi of the Dead Tide, which is, I think, one of the cooler cards in this set. 3 mana, 1/4 legendary Merfolk Wizard for 1, a blue and a black. Tap. Exile cards from your graveyard equal to the number of opponents you have. Spoiler, it's gonna be 1.
Yeah.
Target creature card in your graveyard gains Encore until end of turn. Encore cost is equal to its mana cost. Wheeler.
So cool. I mean, yeah, this card's kind of absurd, but it's not like the court absurds, you know? Like I don't look at this and I get exhausted by it existing.
No, this is a cool good card, not like a grown good card.
This card is sick. And like even the like non, like spoiler alert, I'm going to mention dredge, but even the non-dredge like uses of this card, which there are a lot, are extremely cool and good. It like, yeah, you can do wacky combo kill things with it, but also you can just, I don't know, there are a bunch of pretty good creatures you can bring back with ETBs.
Yeah, you can just like value town them out.
I was going to say, do mid-range value decks want to play a 3 mana 1/4?
That's the kind of body that's not unreasonable to play.
Yeah, the 4 toughness is huge.
Yeah, because
and
they like it's gonna block plus Eater removal spell or Eater removal spell straight up, and like a bunch of the red dodges most of the red removal.
You can get it back with Savine's Reclamation. Oof.
You can save it with Caracas.
Oof.
All right, cool.
Get back your Monarch creatures.
Oof. We keep saying oof here. All right.
Even just stuff like playing this and like discarding your like Prime Speaker Vanifar or whatever. And then next turn, like let's say you get a Prime Speaker Vanifar in the graveyard and you get to untap with this. It's like, congratulations, you now have your Vanifar out with haste. Like that's pretty huge.
Pretty spicy. All right, let's move on and talk about Archelos Lagoon Mystic. Archelos Lagoon Mystic. 4 mana, 2/4 legendary turtle shaman for 1 and a bug. As long as the Lagoon Mystic is tapped, other permanents enter the battlefield tapped. As long as they are untapped, other permanents enter the battlefield untapped. Jer, what do you think?
This card's pretty sweet. I don't think many people are gonna play it. Like it's kind of like a cool design, but not pushed enough to see play in our format. Like I think this could have been 3 mana and then still might not have seen too much play. I don't know. I just don't think it has a wide enough application in our format. Like the 2/4 body for 4 is a pretty large drawback. Like you're not actually going to get to attack into too many boards, and even if you do get to attack, it's not that much of a threat to your opponent.
I will say this card does bring something completely unique to the format in that if I lose to somebody that plays this with Time Vault, I will not be upset. Like that's like the only
Yeah.
Time Vault kill, or one of the few Time Vault kills where I'm like, oh hell yeah, turtle, right? Like it's just like okay,
But this doesn't kill, right? It just gives them the first one.
yeah, an extra turn's an extra turn. I'm probably dead. I'll probably concede anyways. They're like, no, I don't have a loop yet. And I'm like, yeah,
They're just getting
turtle.
back the turn they spent casting this.
Yeah, turtle.
The only thing, turtle power. You just give them the high five and then move on to the next game.
Cool deck. Anyways, thanks for the match. No, I'm not. I haven't done anything. Nah, you got it. Don't worry about it. Bye-bye.
All right, let's talk about Ghen, Arcanum Weaver. 3 mana, 2/3 legendary human wizard for a red, white, and black. Activated ability, pay a red, a white, a black, and sack an enchantment. Tap and sack an enchantment. Return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. I'll field this one for now, and y'all can jump in if you want to. I think this is a really cool ability and naturally starts moving you towards Enchantress. The tricky thing here is the colors, because your Enchantress deck isn't typically in these colors. It's not really a Mardu deck. If this was maybe Bant, it'd be pretty cool, and I'd be much more likely to play it, unless you're maybe playing like a 5-color variant of Enchantress.
Serge, can I play a game with you really quickly?
All right, Wheeler, you wanna grab this one?
Yeah, let's go pep rally here, bud.
Okay.
All right, Serge, give me a C.
Is it court? Are you spelling court?
No, I'm not spelling
C.
court. Give me a U.
U.
Give me an R.
R.
Give me an S.
S.
Give me an E.
Oh.
There you go. Hey. Curses.
How are you getting the curses into your graveyard?
Well, we're a black, red, white deck.
Okay, all right. All right. Enough said.
Yeah, faithless looting, gamble.
So yeah, I guess the only Mardu Enchantress deck, it's not even Enchantress deck, it's just the curse deck. You got your Academy Rectors, you got your Curse Witches, you got like all your 7 to 10 mana curses.
Yeah. I mean, you play previously the deck is just like Academy Rector, Bitterheart Witch, and then like you play a bunch of enchantments that just make your opponent your opponents that are playing a lot of creatures. You make their life miserable. But I mean, again, in these colors, we've received some new cards from this set. Some of them may be courts, as well as stuff like Luris and Animate Dead is an enchantment. Dance of the Dead's an enchantment. You know, there's other options that you can explore with that.
I guess you could be playing the seals, like Seal of Fire and Seal of Doomblade or whatever, as interesting interaction.
Hey, if there's a bunch of courts running around, you might need to play Seal of Cleansing to start blowing things up.
Okay, I want to make this deck now. This deck now. Thanks, Wheeler. My brain is already rotating.
Hey, don't mention it.
I don't know if it's good. That's a lot of mana, but I do know it's sweet.
This card might not even be good enough in that deck, but that deck.
No, I think that deck is. I think that deck. You're like, this is fine. Did you play Ghen? Oh God, no.
Yeah, you play Ghen just because you're like, I kind of have to, right?
Yeah, all right. Let's talk about Jury, Master of the Review. 2 mana, 1/1 legendary human shaman for a black and a red. Whenever you sack a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Jury, and when they die, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Wheeler.
This one's pretty good. It gets bigger, it's cheap, it's in the right colors, and when it dies, which is pretty easy for an aristocrats deck to, kill it, you get to dome out your opponent, and it triggers off of everything, not just sacking creatures. You can sack your fetch lands, spawn tokens, although I guess those are technically creatures, but you get what I'm saying. This card can get pretty big pretty quickly and can dome things out, and like even if you play this and they just kill it immediately, that's okay. I paid 2 mana and I still got to do a thing.
Do you think this is good enough in just like a black-red aggro or mid-range deck? Or do you think it only lives in aristocrats?
Probably only in aristocrats, I think.
Yeah. Like, I'm not super enthused to play this outside of Kratz.
It's always good to examine a card from that and be like, does this do enough? Is it a role player in a specific archetype, or does it have application outside of it? And I can see why we'd be like, yeah, nah, it could probably just live in aristocrats. Let's move on then to Lathiel, the bounteous dawn. Lathiel, the bounteous dawn. Man, gold is always where I really struggle when it comes to pronunciations. Lathiel is a 4-mana 2/2 legendary unicorn for 2, a green and a white, has lifelink, and at the beginning of each end step, if you gained life this turn, distribute up to that many +1/+1 counters on any number of other target creatures. Wheeler.
It's a pretty good horse, I guess, for for a unicorn. This card is like, it's kind of weird to like look at it and talk about it, because it kind of just looks like, oh, this is just a commander card.
We actually really discussed cutting this. We didn't know if it did enough, but we talked ourselves into including it.
Well, I do think it does. It's just like, it does enough in the decks that want to take advantage of this, and it can have relevant, can have a relevant impact on the board, either when it goes infinite, or if you're just doing fair things, air quotes, like in a deck like Pattern Rector, aka Sandra Bullock. That deck gains a lot of life pretty fairly. That's a deck that plays Spike Feeder, which this and Spike Feeder can have a loving relationship. And even, the Soul Warden decks that I started off 2020 with, and then kind of have played less, but still, there are decks that can play this, and you can take advantage of its ability and make your board absolutely massive, or like literally just infinitely sized things. But also, like, one of the things we talked about was, so I'm playing against a red deck, right? And I like have anything like this plus Spike Feeder. Actually, not even a red, like an aggressive deck. Like this plus Spike Feeder. And I'm against an aggressive deck. And I just play this, and I minus Spike Feeder's counter. I gain 2 life and go to my end step. And like, let's say I just put both those counters on Lathiel, or even if I just cash in both of them, like I have a 4/4 or a 6/6 life linking creature against an aggressive deck.
It is worth mentioning Lathiel cannot target itself. Any number of other target creatures.
Oh, well, I don't like this card as much, but I mean, genuinely, like, the fact that it can't get itself out of shock range is a little disappointing.
Yeah, that's a very key other there, right?
I mean, I think then in the previous applications, it still is relevant. Like, again, in Sandy B, like, it's a green creature that you'll be able to find. It being vulnerable isn't anything new. You already have like Animate Dead, Safi, and Ephemerate and stuff. You can save it. The Soul Warden deck, you're literally just playing a bunch of trash cards that come together and occasionally annoy your opponent into submission. So you lose that more fair-ish thing where you can protect this card, but still, it's not the worst thing to include, and might actually just be a totally fine card to play.
All right, let's talk about Liesa, Shroud of Dusk. 5 mana, 5/5 legendary angel for 2 white, white, and a black. Has flying and lifelink, and whenever a player casts a spell, symmetrical, they lose 2 life. Jer, what do you think?
I actually think this card's pretty reasonable to play in like a black-white mid-range deck, which I've been known to play every now and again. Like, you usually want to play some number of Baneslayer-esque cards, and this is probably the best option now, because it's both game over against the red deck and game over, and like gives you an out against Storm if you can like disrupt them long enough to cast it, which is a big if, but it happens sometimes, as opposed to Baneslayer, which is literal stone nothing against the combo decks.
Is there a white-black, like, mid-range D&T list? Because they've been printing a lot of 3-mana white-black creatures that tax your opponent in interesting ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a white-black mid-range list for a while. I've actually won a tournament with it. But yeah, it's not necessarily D&T. I'd say at least I played it as more of a traditional mid-range list. But
yeah, you can play Orzhov and Taxes. That's a thing that's been around for a hot minute, and like won the 2018 year end.
Yeah, but like that deck doesn't play 5-drops, right? Like, this card isn't making it into a low to the ground D&T, which is why I was asking more about that, like higher up, but still trying to tax your opponent, still trying to restrict your opponent, but not in a like, I'm gonna play a bunch of 1 and 2 drop sort of way.
Yeah, I think that's just like more of a mid-range deck, and you just choose to play like you're still playing like Kamahl and Orzhov Pontiff and Tide Hollow Skeller and all those things, just because like those are the best options at that spot on the curve for that deck.
You could, you know what? If Robin showed up with this card in like a 4-color lands mid-range deck, I wouldn't be that shocked. Like it's just because it's like that's a hell of an ability, and like Jer said, like it just also kills red decks. So hey, that's good enough for me.
All right. Let's talk about Reyav, Master Smith. This is a 2-mana 2/2 legendary dwarf artificer for red and a white, and reads, whenever a creature you control that's enchanted or equipped attacks, it gains double strike until end of turn. I think I'm in love. I think this is what Wheeler was feeling when he saw Ingenuity Engine the other day, where you just see that Kaladesh art and your heart starts to pump just a little bit faster.
It makes the Kokoro go doki doki.
I also love the templating on this. Again, it encourages the player to be aggressive, right? You don't have double strike as a defensive mechanism right now. It's like you can get this cool ability, but you have to be aggressive. And I'm just like, okay.
It also works on itself, which is nice. Like not all these cards, like lots of these cards say other, and this doesn't, which is a pretty big deal, I think, because you're often struggling for creatures in this deck. And so you sort of need every creature to be a threat on its own, and this does that.
I legit thought this said that like target creature, like if like when a creature it's all
your
of
whole
them.
board including itself.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Well, the reason this card is so important is classically in the Boros equipment decks, you've had to include some pretty garbage creatures just because they have the word double strike on it. You're like, what? 3 mana 1/3 for 1 red pip that has double strike? Oh baby, get in the deck. You've got a new home here.
You can't
Don't
can't
you
just
hate on prophetic flame speaker?
What are you trying to be like vague that like we won't figure out what card you're slamming?
I mean, it's fine. It's fine.
Fine? Have you cast Giant Growth targeting that bad boy? That's
of
dead.
course, like there's a world that's fantastic, but like Reyav opens up a world in which you can start to go a little bit more mid-range or even go into more like haste and aggressive creatures, and then all of a sudden you play this and your deck just goes into turbo mode, right?
Vroom.
Yeah, vroom.
I went
vroom. Let's go. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love this. This is going to be an auto include in my red-white decks. Do you think we were talking earlier about an aura deck and how there's some really good auras getting printed, and we might be looking at what was the word we were working for that? It's like Sanctum Stompy. Do you think this makes it into that home? Like go more the aura route than the equipment route?
I mean, we from the past couple of sets, because that deck was 2 colors with one of the green white primarily. I guess you could, I know people were trying it with Bant as well, but I mean, adding red seems like a perfectly fine thing. You got green, you're fine, right?
Yeah, it's free.
And like from the past couple of sets, like we've received, they've started to mesh the enchanted and equipped together.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which is really cool.
We've gotten a whole bunch of new tools. So yeah, I mean, if that deck branches into Naya, then absolutely you could play this card.
I love the old fallacy that isn't a 3-color mana base easier than 2. Remember that lie we used to tell ourselves?
Wait, what? Oh, that it isn't?
3-color mana base is way easier than a 2-color mana base. You just get to cast everything.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a lie.
Yeah, it's not a lie. It legitimately is just like, oh yeah.
Oh, I always thought that was a joke.
Well, as long as you have green.
Wait a minute.
Oh, okay. All right.
Wait a minute. Hold up. This makes sense. Blue-white tempo, blue-black tempo. It's all coming together. Oh no. Yeah, it's but 5-color, that's where the real moneymakers at.
No, that's when the wheels come off, right? It's like 1 color, you're fine. 2-color, things start to struggle. 3 and 4, you're in the money. 5, you've gone too far.
Yeah, the 5-color mana base is no good.
What are you talking about? 5-color with a bajillion artifacts? You're good to go.
Well, that's 6 colors. 6 colors good again.
Ooh, yes.
Okay. All right. 6 colors when you're back in the money, of course.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our final card of the set review today. That is Wyleth, Soul of Steel. 3 mana 2/2 legendary human warrior for 1, a red and a white. This card, much like Aesi, is in the Commander Precon decks, not in the packs. Is that right, Wheeler?
Yeah, that's correct.
And They say whenever they attack, draw a card for each aura and equipment attached to it. And I will be absolutely putting this in the exact same deck as Reyav, because I think it's, to quote Wheeler, I think this card is cool and good.
Yeah, it's got trample. That's nice. I'd love it. Love to see trample added onto any creature that cares about getting bigger.
Well, that's that pseudo evasion, right?
Yeah. I think that's important. If this card didn't have trample, I'd be less enthused because I mean it is a legend that dies to shock, but like it's if you are able to equip it with like crafted war gear or bone splitter or whatever, like doesn't
Right.
really matter, then you're still able to just punch through without the worry of like a spirit token kind of ruining your day.
I think this is a card. This card's a solid role player, and I'll have a home there. All right, we're actually a little bit further ahead than I thought we would be. Let's open up really quickly to broad thoughts on the set as a whole. This is a set that was not designed for a format, right? This is a multiplayer set. It wants to throw out haymakers over and over. What's it going to do for Highlander?
I mean, I think there are a bunch of really cool cards printed for a format that will see some play. Like, there are a lot of really cool designs, like Hullbreacher's a really sweet design, Wheel of Misfortune, a few other ones, like, of cards that are, like, similar to cards that have been printed before, but just have a better cost or a better effect or are more interesting. So I think that's sweet and good.
Yeah, I do like a lot of the gold cards we talked about today. I think all of those are very fun and very cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of role player. I mean, because of the nature of the set, right? Like you have a bunch of legendary creatures with the idea that they can lead the helm of a commander deck, and commander decks are often, very thematically tied, which is going to lead to them printing a bunch of cards that push either somewhat narrow themes with the idea that you can overlap them with other partners, or that are just very concentrated on doing this, cool thing that hasn't been done before. And so you get a bunch of support to decks that have, that are very thematic and just there's, they need redundancy as much as they can get, like Merfolk, right? Merfolk's like, please just give us like a playable 2-drop. Like it doesn't matter what it does. If it's reasonable, we'll take it. And instead they're like, here's a Hull Breacher. And you're like, oh my God. Okay, well, that's a lot,
You're
right?
like, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. I was expecting less, but hey, I'm not complaining. I don't want it to sound like that. Yeah, there's a bunch of extremely powerful cards as far as like focusing on very specific themes.
I don't think it's as warping as Throne of Eldraine, though.
Wait, hold on.
If we're excluding the courts.
Well,
But
you can't exclude the courts when you're comparing set by set, then we'll exclude Oko.
All right, that's fair. Because I was just, okay, all right, stand corrected. Okay, let's talk about the Monarch then really quickly. What do you think it's going to do to our format?
I'm going to scream into the mic for the next 5 minutes. Let me know when you need me.
All right, so overall negative, too strong?
Yeah, I'm going to just reiterate what I said, and that it's just clearly not designed for a format, and that like any decks that want to fight on like a remotely fair access, it just warps the game around the monarchy. And if your deck is not as well set up as your opponent's deck to fight on that access, you're likely just going to lose the game as soon as it gets introduced, which is too bad.
Yep. The Monarch tends to lead to not a lot of games. It stops Magic from either being played or stops the Magic that is played from being relevant, which is, I think, if some of the problematic cards of the past couple of years have been any kind of like indication, leads to not the best gameplay. Or, we play Magic to play Magic, so that our decisions will have consequences or payoffs.
So, well, then here's a very important question, and let's just get ahead of it because it's going to be in the comments. We have council members here. I know we don't like to talk about pointing or anything ahead of time, but do you think
just one council member?
I'm not even on the council anymore.
Oh, but you have former, right? Like you still have a big voice in the format. We all do. Do you think Monarch is the sort of thing that we might see getting pointed or maybe removed from our format if it's this warping?
I don't.
And I know we don't have a definitive answer here, but is that the direction you think it's going as a mechanic?
I don't think so. Like our format, as soon as you ban the first card, changes so drastically.
Yeah, as Canadian Highlander as it is right now is based off the fact that nothing is banned, and so when you ban something like that, then you're kind of just, it's like, well, I thought I came into this format because I thought things weren't banned, right?
Yeah, it just becomes a different format. And I think it's too difficult to point because you have to point so many cards. Like you have to point all the like top tier Monarch cards pretty much equally. And then it just becomes a mess to balance the rest around.
I think those are really good points, and I agree, yeah.
I think you sort of live with it for the time being and hope that it's not as bad as we think it is.
It's one of those things where it's like, do we feel as though the format would be better if these cards didn't exist? Yeah, but would we want to go through the process of having everything, like all these cards banned? It's like, well, that's just not Canlander.
All right, and then let's have one last fun final topic. The new courts in order that you think is the strongest. I think we all agree that green is the strongest.
Yeah.
All right, second place. My vote is probably on black or blue. What do you think?
Mine's on white.
White? Really? White I had as last place.
Really?
I'm on white or blue.
Hold on, sorry. Court of Grace. Let me refresh my memory on what that one is.
You get a 4/4 flyer.
But like, isn't the clock of that? I guess it does a good job of protecting the Monarch.
I literally dropped something out of shock. I didn't think that was a thing that happened in real life. Yeah,
Okay, all right. Green and then white next. All right, because we had the most votes for white. And then
I had blue.
Then you had
Yeah.
blue, Wheeler?
And then, well, I guess I would put blue at number 2, white at number 3, but it's very close for me.
Yeah, I had blue or black for the next one. So I think at a popular vote, we have white and or blue at 2 or 3. Then what do you think? Black or red?
I think black just because it's cheaper, but they're all very, very good cards.
Oh yeah, they're all excellent. So what do you think, Wheeler? Is red the weakest or black the weakest?
I would put red a little bit above black.
Because it deals with the board as opposed to the hand?
Well, it's also just very close. I think like I would tier this as like at 3 different tiers, right? Instead of, not to overcomplicate things, but
Yeah, I agree. It's like green, white/blue, black/red.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right, that's fair. That's fair.
It's like
Cool.
triple S tier, double S tier, and S tier.
yeah.
A doesn't even come into the equation.
No.
That's gonna do it for our episode today. If you have any thoughts on Monarch and the format, if you have any thoughts on your own personal ranking for the courts, let us know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for listening to our 2-part Commander Legends set review. I've been Serge, joined by the wonderful Jer and Wheeler. Thank you very much for listening. A reminder, this podcast is brought to you by you, the support of the Patreon at patreon.com/LoneyReadyRun, as well as through the YouTube subscriptions. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.